Hello, we're here in the Kenny K studio in WMNF 88.5. Today is, what, the 28th? 28th of February in 2016. And this is another piece of the Kenny K documentary trying to tell the life story of Kenny Waters, Tampa's first hip-hop DJ and a prominent figure in music history in Tampa. We're here with Mabili from 88.5, and you got a history with Kenny K.
Yeah.
So, we've talked plenty of times. We just, this is us trying to actually record it now.
Okay.
So, wondering if you could kind of give a little background on who you are, how long you've been with WMNF, and, just a little background.
Yeah, just briefly, I came to WMNF back in 1991, 92.
Okay.
And Kenny K was here, but he had been here a lot earlier than that. He had come around about the birth of the station, maybe a few years after the birth of the station in 1978. So he must have come in the early 80s, mid 80s.
Wow.
And when I got here, he was the talk of the town. He was very well known, very popular. But by the time I came along and got more involved at this radio station, he was already very ill. He needed a liver, and that became a cause célèbre. And that was what basically was part of my earliest memories here at this station, was really advocating for that cause.
Okay.
And because Mickey Mantle needed a liver at the same time, he got his, but Kenny K, being a working class man, did not. And so that was very, very sad and unfortunate. We lost Kenny shortly after that, around 1993. And but his memory has lived very strong in this radio station. In fact, we're sitting in a studio that has been dedicated to Kenny K. So this little scratch studio is where we can record in here. We can hook this studio up to other studios, and 2 studios are on the air at the same time. It's small, but it's quite state of the art, and we're
Awesome.
proud of it.
Very nice, very nice. So what is your role with WMNF now?
Right now, I'm more of an admiral. Started out as a talk show host, but I did come here to relieve Kenny's position during his illness.
Okay.
And maintain hip-hop on
Okay.
the air. So I feel like I was standing in the gap of the hip-hop legacy in Tampa, and
Nice.
in that short period of time, we were able to find other DJs who maintained this allegiance
Right.
to Kenny K.
Now, you said that you were brought in from where? Where did you come from prior to Tampa and 88.5?
I moved here from New Orleans,
Okay.
the New Orleans, Louisiana area. And when I came here, it was exciting to find that we had a radio station like this in this sleepy little town called Tampa. But it was a radio station that was ahead of its time.
Okay.
By allowing an actual hip-hop show on the air, which was in the 1980s was considered still a subversive music form of expression.
Right.
Wasn't even included in Grammy categories yet. So, this was really, hip-hop was a musical form that was not expected to last. But because of pioneers like Kenny K playing it on radio when big-time radio stations wouldn't touch it or would only play it at late hours of the night, here was Kenny K really making this party central for Tampa. And this place used to be popping with people because of Kenny K. He was a draw. And I remember it was really popular for teenagers to go to the skating rink. But I would say WMNF and Kenny K's House of Pain was probably the second most popular place to be.
Nice.
In the 1980s.
So were you ever in the studio with Kenny, and did you work with him during the shows?
I did spend some brief times in the studio, and one thing I can say about Kenny K was his humor. He made people laugh. That was important. You heard it in his delivery on air, but what was great about Kenny is that he was the same person off air. It wasn't just an act. It wasn't just a personality.
Right.
What you heard on the air is what you got when you shook his hand
Okay.
when you met him. I also went to junior college here in town
Okay.
with Kenny K. So that was before I came to the radio station. So I was aware of Kenny K then before knowing him as a radio personality.
Okay.
But I couldn't tell the difference. You know, he was the same person as always. I remember giving him a ride home in my Oldsmobile Duster. And I had a flat coming on that night, and he just joked about it. The Lord provides you with these cars, and you don't want to change your tires and take care of them. You know, I was like, you're right. Okay, so that's just a glimpse into the personality that you heard on radio and that you've experienced.
So he was a natural.
He was a natural. He was a lightning rod for hip hop, but he was also a lightning rod for his friends, for people who knew him, and he introduced and made hip hop palatable to a very southern mentality town, and a radio station that was, started by hippies, so they were a little more open to the idea of hip hop. But even hippies had problems with aspects of hip hop, and he made it palatable. Plus, it helped that he had a politics that was easily equated to the politics of this radio station. So
okay, yeah, very progressive and
very progressive.
Yeah, okay.
And unlike the fearful conservatives who wanted to call anything like hip hop or jazz or blues the devil's music, you had none of that here.
Right.
And so it was a perfect fit for Kenny to be here. And until he got sick, this is where he stayed.
Yeah, right. And then, of course, he did the musical side. He created digital. He founded Digital Underground. Everything. Now, was Digital Underground a thing that you had kind of heard of?
Yeah.
In regards to Kenny?
As a matter of fact, it was the first thing I heard of.
Okay.
It was very popular, and it was another source of pride that here we were, basically putting Tampa on the map.
Right.
In the hip hop world, through this little unknown group called Digital Underground that had such a crazy professional sound that we couldn't wait for the rest of the world to hear it. So
that's
Digital
awesome.
Underground was the talk of the town.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, what is how did you feel when they told you, hey, you got to take over, or you got to start filling in? I mean, that's a big responsibility.
Actually, I asked them.
Okay.
Because my thinking was, even though this was a progressive radio station, they still didn't really understand hip hop. And then, even in the early '90s, well, I guess especially in the early '90s, there was this tendency to fear what was to come. That the pioneers of hip hop were already considered old school,
right.
And this new, more profane hip hop was taking over commercial airwaves, and I believe there was fear that commercial hip hop would come here. So I remember that was always a source of political. That was a sort of political issue within the hip hop community. Are we the pioneers who started it, or are we gonna go commercial?
Right.
And that was always a source of tension on hip hop, and it played itself out right here at the radio station. And when I took it over, that was still a source of tension.
Okay.
And it was funny because we would judge hip hop songs in the '90s when I was doing the show in that short period of time as whether or not it had too much R&B in it. And if it had too much R&B, then it maybe should not be played. So, because it was too soft.
Right.
But, now we know that the fusion of hip-hop and R&B and jazz, all of that has made hip-hop, given hip-hop staying power.
Right.
And global power.
But in a sense, then the message is kind of lost. That rivalry has kind of played out since the '90s, and hip hop's become very commercialized and it's kind of watered down.
Yeah, that was always the fear, but I think because that was always a fear, we've come full circle. Because how do we have a Kendrick Lamar with all of his politics on the biggest musical stage in the world,
right.
The Grammys, here in 2016. So, from 1982 with The Message to
right.
Kendrick Lamar's to Pimp a Butterfly means that we've come full circle.
And I love the connection, because if you would connect to Pimp a Butterfly, Kendrick's talking to Tupac at the end.
Exactly.
Tupac, Digital Underground, Kenny K.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk that Tupac and Kenny talked
Yeah.
back in the day, and and
Absolutely.
they saw each other and traded ideas.
Right.
So to know that you can trace Kendrick Lamar to this station.
To this station, to Kenny K's spirit, and Kenny K and Tupac did have a relationship, and I believe that is what made Digital Underground such a source of pride in this town.
That's excellent. So how did the audience feel when you were on air? And I mean, you're not Kenny.
I'm not Kenny. I think that it was very little about me. It wasn't about me.
Okay.
And I felt good about that. It was about the fact, I remember people coming in off the street just excited that there was hip-hop on the radio.
Okay.
And they were surprised because they understood that Kenny was no longer around.
Right.
And so they figured hip-hop would no longer be around.
Okay.
But for them to wake up on a Saturday, to turn on the radio on a Saturday night and still hear hip-hop, even after we buried Kenny, was a source of excitement.
Okay.
And people would come and just exclaim how grateful and glad they were that they were still able to hear hip-hop here in Tampa Bay, because the commercial radio stations still were not touching it.
Oh, wow. So what did you do then? I know you said you were sort of like the substitute teacher. You were just kind of the stopgap.
Yeah, I was
How did
standing
that
in the
play?
gap. It was interesting because I came, as I said, here as a news person, as a public affairs person, and it gave me an opportunity to experiment with the message in the music.
Okay.
And so I remember, bringing in the Nation of Islam local representative in Tampa
Okay.
to the radio station during the hip hop show and listen to him use hip hop jargon in our conversation.
Okay.
So I think it was kind of interesting and fun just standing in the gap.
Yeah.
And it not being about me. It was about the music and about the message.
And then what did you do after that? You handed it over to
the Mad Links.
Okay.
Who people will probably recognize the name. Mad Links was a college student in the mid-'90s here at the University of South Florida and in Tampa. And he came to fill up his gas tank at a gas station, and I happened to be working at that gas station when I wasn't here at the radio station.
Okay.
So, and I asked him if he knew, because he was blasting hip-hop from his car. I asked him if he knew about the radio station in Kenny K, and I promptly invited him on up here, and he came and never left. And next thing I know, he was a nationally known name. So
Wow.
we have been known to launch acts. And Kenny, if he had not gotten sick, would have also been part of a national
Oh, sure.
act.
I'm sure there have been people that have said, he was working with Public Enemy, he was working with Busta Rhymes,
That's
he was
right.
working with some big
Tupac.
names.
Mhm.
Yes, indeed.
And it's just a fluke of history that he just wasn't in place when the opportunity came. So
Yikes.
it's being at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we talked a little bit about Kenny's politics. Did you ever have any political conversations with him in regards to culture and society and politics? Is that anything you guys covered?
No, not really. Like I said, Kenny was he was the funny man.
Okay.
He was so easy to talk to, and in fact, I never really knew his politics.
Oh, really?
In terms of outside of the message in the music, and outside of him giving some indicators between sets, between songs.
Right.
But I never really knew what his politics was, because he was always about fun, having fun. But I do understand that he had a relationship with the Uhuru movement, which is a Black Panther-like organization here in Tampa that actually had gotten its start in Oakland, just as the Black Panthers did. So there was an unbroken relationship between the Black Panthers, Huey Newton, Kenny K, the Uhuru movement,
Right.
and in those relationships, I began to get a clear understanding of his politics. But he never really trumpeted it.
Interesting. and the music he's playing, the Public Enemies and stuff like that.
Exactly.
It kind of
Spoke for
gives
him.
it definitely did speak for him. So, in the years since, after Kenny's passing, you know, was there sort of he seemed to live on, but only in certain people, until maybe the last few years. I was wondering if you could talk about that.
This is true. There was I think what happened was it was part of a national or maybe even a global awareness of the ability of this music to bridge generations.
Okay.
And so I think that has made it possible for there to be a resurgence of all that was good in hip hop. Whether, you know, and I think all cities, all towns that have radio stations like this have gone through that. We've heard of the Miami-based sound. We've heard of the Atlanta sound. I think they all have their figures
Right.
that they can coalesce around, but it's all part of a national movement to reconstitute hip-hop. And I think that's what has led to a re-emergence of Kenny K. So, yeah, in 2015, we did see the third annual tribute to Kenny. So that indicates, yeah, that is a new awareness of Kenny.
It's definitely a growing, you know, and we were on Pirate Radio, USF's hip hop station a few months ago, just to talk about that. And, you know, you've been, you know, I can't thank you enough for some of your insights here and, you know, helping me out in trying to get some of this stuff together and coordinate it.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting, you know, to hear these stories and to talk to people, and everybody's just so willing to talk.
Yeah.
Because it's something that they haven't talked about in years.
Absolutely. That's part of the resurgence, and I can't thank you enough for recognizing that there is this hunger.
Right.
Because I think you sense it.
Right.
You know that there has been this energy in the air and has been latent. And now I think we have an opportunity to make sense of it all. And
it can't come at a more important time.
Absolutely.
Being that that hip hop needs to play a more important role socially, like Kendrick Lamar and stuff like that. It's time for people to kind of wake up and say, well, they've been talking about this message now for 20 years.
Right.
Who was it that was talking about this? You know, we saw the Black Panther documentary.
Right.
And so you're starting to see it, and it seems that just the time is right to tell these stories.
Exactly, and it's time. And I think what had happened was what happens with history generally is that the victors write the story. And what we're seeing is that now all of us can have a story to tell.
Right.
And a contribution to make to the overarching history. So, yeah, this is a perfect time for that, you know, and it's a perfect opportunity for hip-hop to find its way, and this may be its way.
Excellent, excellent. Well, kind of want to wrap up maybe then. Is there anything I forgot? I'm trying to think timeline and...
Well, you did mention the Black Panthers, the resurgence in that, you know, he was a pallbearer for Huey Newton, and you have a very important picture that proves that, shows that, and
yes.
And I think that whole excitement around Black Panther, that whole Free Huey movement was, you know, gave a sense of excitement, a sense of freedom to express, and it feels like that feeling is back again, you know, and it doesn't have to be around one individual, or it could be around a host of individuals, and Kenny K is one of a host of individuals around which that excitement is growing. So I think it's important to recognize all of the little things we did. And, you know, even the idea that Kenny K was so popular in a town and at a time when hip-hop was considered so subversive and so fringe that, you know, this was a party spot, you know, that he got suspended a couple of times because it was too popular.
Okay.
You know, so, you know, there was a fear that it was going to get too rowdy and out of control. So that just goes to show how easy it is for people to have misconceptions and act on them.
Right.
But then later we recognized that that was a grand opportunity for the radio station. And maybe we're finding a way to recreate that excitement.
I was wondering, maybe could you provide any details on the suspensions? I know that everybody kind of mentions it, but I don't know if anybody says anything about a specific time, a specific event, or the radio station's position on that.
It's really hard because, you know, those are personnel issues that they don't really go into details about.
Right.
It's just that at the time it was a really small building. We have this state of the art building now.
Okay.
But at the time it was a converted house.
Okay.
Some
Okay.
single family home on the same lot of land, but you know, it was such a small place that it was too many people.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I think that, you know, maybe the fire marshal had some problems or made some code threats, so the radio station always afraid of losing funding.
No, that's
You know,
totally understandable.
had to make some show that they were making some changes.
Keep it under control.
Yeah, they were keeping some controls over it.
Okay, no, that makes
you know,
sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So, how did you feel like when Kenny was sick? How did you learn about that? How did you feel like? Who told you, or was it him personally? Or?
No, I was actually found out through the radio station. That was
Okay.
I think one of the staff member, I believe it was Mercedes Skelton, who mentioned it to me. But it was such a cause celebre that at the time that we were beginning to hear about it, you know, people like Shock G, who also hails from Tampa,
Right.
you know, wanted to come and talk about it and wanted to try to raise funds to help him get his liver. But, you know, the fact that it was such a cause
Right.
that so many people, just because it spread like wildfire, that I really can't remember how I particularly heard about it. I just know that it was just it became part of the local folklore.
Okay.
And we were just so saddened by the fact that we weren't able to save his life.
Right.
And I think that's why he's become such a cause today.
And when we talk about, you know, celebrities and everything, one of the people I ran into a few weeks ago, I ran into Gary Sheffield, the baseball player. I mean, him and Dwight Gooden both raised money,
Yes.
a couple $100,000.
Yes,
for Ken.
yes. That was a vast effort. And, you know, it gave us an opportunity to find out just how popular this man was.
Which is interesting because, I mean, it's a Saturday night local radio show, which,
Right.
you know, now local radio, and maybe you can expound a little bit more, has kind of lost, it's not as popular. Obviously, there's more ways to ingest music now, or digest music.
Mm-hmm.
You've got online, you got satellite radio, iTunes, etc. So it has, for local radio, I don't know if people really understand how important local radio was at that time.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you might be able to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it was very important because you know, when you talk about elites who controls all industries,
Right.
and you know the music industry is heavily controlled, and so what got played on radio was highly controlled. So public radio, the independence of public radio and independent radio was highly important to those of us who were in it, who's here, because we always knew that we were threatened, you know, because of the business model,
Right.
looking for donations to sustain us, and then matching them with government funds, and then the right-wing attacks on the funds for public broadcasting. All of that was taking place. We've had threats to the state's funding from the state of Florida to this radio station because there was a right-wing senator who hated the politics of the station. So to hide the fact that he no longer wanted to recognize First Amendment rights, he just decided to use this political tactic in his sheer naked power at the state to try to deny the station funds. He wasn't successful. He was successful in reducing them, but he wasn't successful in taking them away. So there's always been these threats. And so all we ever had was the people to sustain us. And that included not just donations, but just this basic feeling of support for the need for independent radio stations, because you know, commercial radio is very, very controlled, and just like commercial news, and commercial television shows, you know, all of that's very scripted and controlled. So we were really revolutionary in that sense.
Excellent, excellent. Now, one of the things that you've been able to help me out on a lot is recording some of these old shows.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that, some of the help that you've provided me in recording these old shows, and what it's like to hear those old shows again. Because I know that's something that you've been really interested in.
It was, when we were doing that, it was just interesting to hear his voice again. I hadn't realized that I had forgotten his voice. It was, when people go away from you, you don't realize just how much you've lost until you hear it again. And so finding those recordings and hearing them again not only took me back there, but it felt like he was alive again.
Excellent.
It just really felt good.
And where do you see the future of, where would you like to see the future of this project I'm doing? And obviously you played a big hand in helping me out, so where would you kind of see this going? And
I'd like to see this become a documentary for national and international importance, and I'd like to see it in the Library of Congress.
Excellent.
I want to see this story told and preserved forever.
Excellent. And in regards to the radio stations archiving this story, how would you like to see the role of the radio station as a somebody who's helped out the radio station now for 20, 30 years? How would you like to see the radio station represented in this story? And or either that, or how would you like to see them archive these shows and everything? And is that something that you would like to have happen?
Yes, I would. I think the radio station would benefit from having this as a premium offer. We need to offer premiums to people who donate to the radio station. That would be a perfect premium. We've done that on a couple of occasions where we've done the history of this radio station. And we've talked, Kenny was included in that production, and it was something that people who support the radio station would be given as a gift if they donated to the radio station. Well, I would like to see this story being used in that way as well. That once it's done, that people donate to this radio station as a circle of friends, join our radio station as a circle of friends. This is a gift you will get.
Right. Excellent. Excellent. Well, I appreciate that. And again, I think I've covered pretty much everything, and I know you helped me out there. And then if you have any closing before we turn it off here?
I just would like people to recognize that it is not healthy for any culture to marginalize people. Do not marginalize, especially the young people. They have a story to tell. They have a message. And whatever form that message takes, as long as it is a positive message, as long as it's a message that is of historical importance, it should not be marginalized. And if it had been successfully marginalized, if hip-hop had been successfully marginalized at the local level, it would have been marginalized at the national and the international level. And because it was not marginalized at the local level, it has had staying power.
Awesome. And Kenny, of course, plays a huge role in that.
Plays a huge role in that. It's in the context of not only Tampa, but in the national context, because like we've said, he's had relationships that are vast, whether it's politically with movements, the Nation of Islam, the 5%ers, and other hip-hoppers who were finding their way. The only way you're going to find your way is to explore all the things that are important to you. And I think hip-hop has done that for at least 3 or 4 generations now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate the help.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.